10 years ago, 1 Sing dollar gave you 2 ringgit 50 cent. Today, that one same Sing dollar will give you 3 ringgit 45 cent. That's about a 38% drop over the last decade, or in simpler math, that's about 4% depreciation of the ringgit currency every single year. And that's also almost equivalent to your fixed deposit rates. I mean, no wonder Singaporeans always come JB to pump petrol lah. It's literally 3.5 times cheaper over here. Anyways, why is a Sing dollar so strong compared to our ringgit currency? Is it because of our economic policies, the US dollar interest rate hikes, or can we just put all the blame towards our unstable Malaysian politics? Well, let's first look at this from an economics angle. It's a well-known fact that one of the major factors contributing to that is the difference in economic fundamentals. Let me explain more. While both countries' gross domestic product or GDP has grown over the years, Singapore leads in GDP per capita at a whopping 72,000 US dollars as compared to Malaysia's 11,000 US dollars in 2021. Our beloved Malaysia, although it is rich in natural resources like oil, gas, palm oil and rubber, it also means that our economy is dependent on the global commodity price fluctuations. So if there's any crash or decline in the global crude oil prices, that would also mean we earn less money as a nation. Simple as that. And whereas for Singapore, they are a much smaller nation geographically and they have limited natural resources, and that's why you see they even have to import fresh water from Malaysia. And for some reason, if Malaysia choose to turn off the tap, they are literally screwed, and that has pushed them to develop high value sectors like finance, technology and pharmaceuticals. And if you combine that with the good politics and governance from the late Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, they quickly became the global financial hub that attracted about 2.5 trillion Sing dollar, or about 1.8 trillion US dollars in foreign direct investments, FDI, as of the end of 2021. And clearly, Malaysia has lost out to Singapore in terms of FDI, as we only recorded slightly lesser than 200 billion US dollars in 2022. That's about 10 times lesser compared to Singapore. And of course, you can probably blame that on our unstable politics, higher corporate tax rate of 24%, while Singapore is at only 17%, and also more complex regulations which affect the ease of doing business here in Malaysia. So that's why you can see foreign investors and also businesses would rather deploy their money and assets in Singapore as compared to in Malaysia. And according to this report by the World Economic Forum, Singapore is ranked number 1 in the world for trade openness, while Malaysia is only at number 37. And another separate report by Fitch, which is a global credit rating agency, also highlighted that Singapore is rated AAA, while Malaysia is only rated at BBB+. And that simply means that investors has more confidence in Singapore's economic and governance and prefer to hold Singapore dollar as compared to the Malaysian ringgit. And circling back to my previous point on Singapore having limited natural resources, they are heavily reliant on international trade, which resulted in them having a more unique method of managing their own currency. And you can see that their gross exports and imports are more than 300% of their GDP, whereas Malaysia only stands at a much lower rate of 131% of GDP. And lo and behold, the differences in currency managements in both countries largely explains why Sing dollar keeps appreciating against the Malaysian ringgit. And just before I dive into Singapore's strategy, let's first understand how Malaysia manages the ringgit. Like the US and most countries, our central bank, or the Bank Negara Malaysia (BNM), targets the interest rate, or also known as the overnight policy rate (OPR), to stabilize our economy. And the ringgit, like many other global currencies, is influenced by the value of the US dollar, or the world's reserve currency. So the strengthening of the US dollar usually results in the weakening of the ringgit. And to show you better, as of the recording of this video, 1 US dollar can give us 4 ringgit 70 cents, but it was only 4 ringgit 5 years ago. And it's not just the ringgit, the Japanese yen, Chinese yuan and Indonesian rupiah have also been depreciating against the US dollar because of the aggressive interest rate hikes by the US to calm down inflation since 2021. And why does this happen? Well, the US raises its interest rate, it encourages people people around the world to save in US dollar, and that in turn increases the demand for US dollar and subsequently causing it to rise in terms of its value. Meanwhile, countries like Malaysia, where Bank Negara Malaysia increases the OPR at a much slower pace than the US, only 1.75% to date as compared to US 5% hike. So as the demand for US dollar skyrockets while the demand for ringgit remains more or less the same, this will lead to the ringgit's continuous decline against the US dollar. So let's get back to Singapore. Surprisingly, or maybe not, Singapore is not heavily affected by the US rate hikes, and in fact, compared to last year, the Sing dollar actually strengthened against the US dollar, and this is because, unlike Malaysia, MAS or Monetary Authority of Singapore does not control its currency based on interest rates but on exchange rates instead. Let's imagine if Singapore imports durian from Malaysia, that means the durian has to be paid in ringgit Malaysia, and when the Sing dollar becomes stronger against the ringgit, the durian will cost them lesser. Simpler, right? And on the other hand, if they export microchips out from Singapore, a weaker Sing dollar is technically better as it is cheaper for other countries to buy, making it more competitive and boost the demand for their microchip. So it is important that MAS keep the Sing dollar at a level that makes imports affordable but doesn't hurt export too much. And in order to do so, since 1981, MAS has measured and adjusted the Sing dollar using the Singapore dollar nominal effective exchange rate, or the S NEER, with the guidance of a basket of currencies that includes their major trading partners such as the US dollar, renminbi, Japanese yen, etc., which kind of works like an index. So when the index dips, which indicates the Sing dollar's weaker performance against the basket of currencies, MAS buys up the Sing dollar to strengthen the currency, and vice versa. When the index goes up, MAS sells Sing dollar to weaken the currency to balance it off. And since US dollar is part of its currency basket, if the US dollar appreciates, MAS might adjust its policy to allow the Sing dollar to appreciate together. And this explains why the Sing dollar only goes up and up over the past few decades. So what does the future hold for our beloved ringgit? Well, unfortunately, I do not have a crystal ball to tell whether it will continue to fall or rise against the Sing dollar. But one thing I know for sure is Malaysian food is better than Singaporean food lah. That one cannot deny one. Anyways, what we can probably expect is that if the US dollar continues to appreciate, the ringgit will likely continue to depreciate against the Sing dollar. Or you might see some improvements to the ringgit after the dust settles with the upcoming state elections in August. And you might ask if pegging the ringgit to US dollar will work as suggested by the Dr. Mahathir so that the ringgit will not further drop. Well, if you're unfamiliar with currency pegging, it essentially means fixing the exchange rate of ringgit to US dollar, say at 4 ringgit to 1 US dollar. And on paper, yes, this could bring stability to the ringgit, but you need to know that this can also result in us losing the independence of controlling the ringgit and having to follow whatever monetary decision that is or will be made by the US. And given the rate of the US increasing the interest rates, if Malaysia follows, this might be devastating for Malaysian individuals and also businesses with a lot of debt commitments like mortgage, personal and also business loans. So therefore, as a Malaysian that has no control over the macroeconomic decisions, we can only control whatever we can control and try to reduce the impact of the falling ringgit by voting. Yes, but more realistically, we can find ways to earn foreign currencies. For example, working for companies that offer salaries in Sing dollar or US dollar, or consider having extra cash in Sing dollar via foreign currency bank accounts, or invest in stocks on the Singapore Exchange or the New York Stock Exchange. The idea is very simple. Diversify your income streams and assets into different currencies so that you are not 100% reliant on the Malaysian ringgit. And if you are keen to start protecting your ringgit today, Interactive Brokers is the best platform to do so, as it provides access to over 150 global markets, including Singapore and the US, and not to mention that they can support up to 55 different currencies, including the ringgit and Sing dollars through their partnership with Wise. So feel free to check out the link in the pinned comment down below to start investing with Interactive Brokers. So, what do you think? Can our ringgit come back against the US dollar and also Sing dollar? What can our politicians and regulators do to fix or stop this decline? Or are there any necessary changes to our economic policies that will propel our country forward? Let me know in the comments down below. That's all for this video. I hope you learned something from it. As usual, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay, road to 1 Sing dollar 5 ringgit.